We're really delighted to have this evening Bill Doggett, the namesake and nephew of Bill Doggett, the iconic jazz organist. Bill is a historian, a lecturer, a archivist, a exhibition curator, and a documentary filmmaker. We've been talking about this for a long time to get him from California to here, so fortunately he's here for the IASA conference at the Library of Congress, so we were able to work it very conveniently. So we're really happy to have you here and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking a time out of this day to come and be a part of this experience. So I'm really delighted. I am Bill Doggett II, introducing myself again, as Judith has. I am technically William Allen Doggett II. I am the youngest son of John N. Doggett Jr., who was the younger brother of Bill Doggett, 2 years younger. And I was named for Bill Doggett because of the fact that at that time he and his wife did not have kids, and so here we are so many years later, and the good news is that they did have me right before the dawn of Honky Tonk, if you will, and that I, in fact, am his voice on this side, literally. My uncle's story is really rather extraordinary. There's a series of things that are unknown. I would have to say, and this is kind of jumping ahead, that I introduced myself to he and my aunt Angela in the late mid-'80s when I worked in radio. We had an event, family event in New York City at the World Trade Center, no less. So we were all at the windows, the top of the world, which was the restaurant at the top of the World Trade Center. And I talked about some of the publicity types of things, and it turns out, retrospectively, that I was right. So it's very interesting. So we're going to start, I think, with the video. The video is a 11-minute tribute that I created that combines part of what you've already begun to see, which is a 2-minute trailer done for sponsors a couple years ago and has been embedded into a series of basically a nice retro perspective of Bill Doggett through his recordings, his iconic LP covers for King Records from 1953 to 59, the music, a couple of the songs, as well as footage that, according to the official records at the Dick Clark Productions, did not exist. This footage was sent to me because of who I am, and I was very fortunate to have it. Where it came from is still unknown to me. Clearly it was done professionally, but it was done in a situation where there was obvious rain. But this is all that we know that exists. I will contact the person who shared it with me, but no one's ever seen it before. And Bill Doggett never talked about it. As in many of the things I'm going to speak about, he never talked about it. And Bill and I were in really interesting conversations, mostly in New York or in St. Louis. Bill was very close to his mother, my grandmother, and my father. We're all technically Philadelphians. So when my grandfather, or Bill and my father's father died in the late 60s, and my grandmother had some health issues, my father at that time had moved to St. Louis. So my grandmother came to St. Louis. So Bill was constantly in St. Louis. So in the late 80s and 90s, he and I began to bond and talk about music. And I wished he had been much more talkative, if you will, for lack of a better term. I will say this, as we are preparing, there is so much more that I would love to share, had he only lived 6 months later. But here we are. Let's start with the film.
Keep talking and we'll get started.
Okay. Well, anyway, the one thing I will talk about is, well, it's a nice video, and actually it was
We'll
fun.
get it on.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So, so while we're waiting for that, one of the things I would talk about that is really rather substantial, and I'll turn the volume up. What's really rather substantial to talk about today, September 28th, 2016, is that this time, and we're going to see some of the PowerPoint, have an opportunity to look at the records, the popular records, the top records, according to Billboard survey for this week, 60 years ago. Honky Tonk reigns very significantly for being a very short time on the chart. This is the time, this week essentially, this whole period is September 15th. Okay, great. We'll start from the beginning. All right, can we turn the lights down?
Tonight, things will swing right here on the boardwalk at Atlantic City, out on the beach, in the water, upstairs, practically everywhere you can think of. So if you will, sit back, enjoy us, chew a while, if you will, live it up. It's a Wrapped in Green show brought to you by Beach Nut Spearmint Chewing Gum. To lead it off, an all-time great. Honky Tonk with Bill Doggett. And now, join my friend Bill Doggett with Blip Blop.
As Floyd Candy Johnson,
Thank you, Bill Doggett.
feel like getting up dancing, you're welcome to moving the stage. This is what Bill was all about, was moving. Music to move in the street. No, that was Eddie Hay. They played together in 1955. A lot of the LPs, people remember Odyssey.
happy to make it. Yeah. I often wonder what I'd be doing, so thinking about when I was 80 years old.
Well, hey, you're doing it, and
Yeah, fortunately so, Bill. Fortunately.
you've inspired a lot of people, that's the thing that
Yeah,
counts.
well, I appreciate that. You know, a lot of people tell me the same thing.
Yeah.
But this is going good. It's going
In
good.
fact, in fact, I came across, because I have been a partner dealer in antique vinyl, especially in 78, and I came across on Philo 78. Telling you, and you were playing this on set, playing piano.
Playing piano, we had a couple of good hits with that. We had, we did Eva Believa, and we did, maybe your name when he comes to see me sometime, a blue prelude, and something else. I can't think of what the four, but we made 4 or 5 on Friday. Yeah, all the things that around 1946, 47.
Really?
Don't seem like almost 40 years, almost 40 years that time.
Yeah.
Almost 50.
Yes, isn't it amazing?
Yeah,
I think, from what I can see, people have been telling me, oh, so-and-so, and then a James quote, oh, this is photo, she mentions Bill Doggett, maybe you see these photos.
we were like together at 55.
Yeah, and all these people say, well, gee, you know what? I think there would be a market for a Bill Doggett book, you know?
73.
That's right.
7250 Franklin Avenue, LA 90046.
Right.
Okay.
Very good. Yeah, I'd love to get that info, get
Great.
your phone
Yeah,
number.
if anything happen like that, I'll see you good on it, man.
Well, no, I want to help you to do
Well,
that.
yeah, but I want to help you too. I can't say.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, one thing wants to see nothing. Yeah, man.
Okay.
And you, young man, you gotta carry it on, baby.
Yeah, I do.
So that's the little tribute introduction to the life of Bill Doggett. I have this as a DVD available for gift giving, or anyone who's interested and wants to hear it a little louder and get out there on the dance floor. That's why we did that way. But there are clearly two very special pieces of this video. I was told that there was no footage in Dick Clark catalog for Bill Doggett, although he was twice on the Dick Clark show. I believe once later, when this is the piece you saw was sent to me. Apparently, it's possible it was sent to me by the son or nephew of the cameraman who shot it, because that kind of explains why it's only partial. I mean, I don't know why the full honky tonk isn't on there, but clearly it was done for TV, and it was done in the early era of Dick Clark, before Dick Clark was integrated in terms of dances. So you see this, and it was also during the time in '57 when there was a lot of formality, and the chewing gum, Wrigley chewing gum, was very formal about the fact of having girls and boys being dress code, and of course all that passed later on. But so it's interesting to see, and it's emblematic of something I'll talk about later about the issue of how America's youth broke the color bar, and in terms of creating an earthquake around music, or how rock and roll and R&B really changed America forever, which is the title of a book that I'll be also speaking on. But anyway, here we are back at my original PowerPoint. So, let me begin. That was pretty cool. Did you enjoy that, by the way? Yeah, cool. Good, yeah. And the fact that, what's really coincidental, and actually my father, Bill's younger brother, was just so taken by the fact that he had no idea that I had a machine at the time in 1996 where I don't know if I'm cutting out or not, but I had a machine in 1996 with, I guess what you call a phone and voice recorder machine. I was actually able to record a sequence. There's actually more to that conversation, but but I edited it a little bit down. But the fact that I had that, or had the vision to do that, you know, and here, 20 years later, we can hear the voice of Bill Doggett. I don't know how many other personal family recordings are out there. So anyway, so we are looking at the classic image of Bill Doggett. It's Bill Doggett, Billy Butler, Shep Shepherd, Clifford Scott, Floyd Candy Johnson make up the Bill Doggett combo, as it's known. Our next image, as we're talking about the issue of Honky Tonk and its status 6 years ago this week, here from Billboard magazines for the survey week ending September 26th, essentially this week, 1956. R&B bestsellers in stores. Honky Tonk is #1. It has been, last week it was #1. It's only been 8 weeks on the charts. #2, Don't Be Cruel, paired with Hound Dog by Elvis Presley. As RCA Victor decided to pair both of them, since obviously Hound Dog I think is a little older, but that was a hot seller. That's #2. And it had been 8 weeks on the chart. Now look at this again. I'm going to Honky Tonk in R&B. Now we'll see other slides where that's not necessarily the case. You know, and there's a lot of controversy around that. Payola, etc. But what's interesting is look at this. Honky Tonk has only been on the charts for 8 weeks, but yet it is #1. Elvis Presley has been on the charts for the same time as #2. That's really a statement. What's #3? Let the Good Times Roll, which is essentially a Louis Jordan song, Louis Jordan 75 song. This time it's done by Shirley and Lee. That's been on the, last week was #2, it's been on the chart 10 weeks. And the fourth is, what is this? This is In the Still of the Night by the Satins, technically a doo-wop group. And then what's #5? My Prayer by the Platters. So African Americans are really making a statement, of course, because the best R&B says bestsellers in stores. Our next slide is a composite of several different pages. Bestseller in stores this week, 6 years ago. Bestseller in stores, most played in jukeboxes, most played by jockeys. The difference between bestseller in store, Honky Tonk is, where is Honky Tonk here? It is down in #2. That's great. What's #1? Elvis Presley. That's, you know, that has to be impressive, right? So most played in jukeboxes, of course Elvis Presley's top, and Honky Tonk is #6, but that's still not bad. Most played by jockeys. Now this is really interesting, of course. This is a statement on a lot of different levels. Don't Be Cool, Elvis Presley's #1, and Honky Tonk is way down at #10. But still, it's within the top 10. That's still 60 years ago for as considered as the landmark R&B instrumental of the dawn of rock and roll. For it to still be #10, played by jockeys, as well as, of course, in jukeboxes, that's a statement, considering what was going on at the time. Next slide. This is also telling. Go past it twice. Great. Most played R&B in jukeboxes. That's interesting. Hound Dog's really not an R&B, but yet it's, of course, it's Big Mom Thornton. But that is technically R&B, but it's the Elvis Presley version. So this is the cover version. So Hound Dog is #1. It's been on the charts for a little while. #2, again, Honky Tonk. #3, The Platters, My Prayer. #4, a Louis Jordan-inspired song, or essentially a Louis Jordan song, as far as I'm concerned. Let the Good Times Roll. Most played, the next graph down there, most played R&B by jockeys. Honky Tonk is #1. Isn't that something? Underneath, of course, they knew better. You know, Elvis Presley's not really an R&B, but yeah, Elvis Presley, RCA Victor is able to get Elvis Presley played, you know, all of that stuff. So that's interesting. Let's go to the next slide. I think I have to press it twice. Great. Honor Roll of Hits. This is for the survey week ending September 26th. It's actually printed, Billboard, October 4th, 1956. So essentially, next week, folks, 60 years ago, next week. Okay? The nation's top tunes. Don't Be Cruel, Canadian Sunset, Hugo Winterhalter, I don't know why, but Doris Day, okay, Sarah is #3, Twilight, You Belong to Me, Hound Dog, #5. Honky Tonk is #7, but we look at the nation's top tunes. That's significant. It had been previously number 8, now it's ranked up to number 7, and has only been 6 weeks on the charts. You know, and of course, I think Ella Henny Moon, wasn't that Teresa Brewer? I'm not sure who it was, but anyway, that's underneath. But I think that's significant. Let's look at the final slide for this particular sequence, which is the honor roll of hits, the nation's top hits for November 21st. The survey ending November 21st, published December 1st, 1956. You have to understand that Honky Tonk, as far as African Americans across the country, is the #1 hit the entire fall. The Billboard charts documentation is very important to see and look at in retrospect to see that it's the documentation of the fact. It's not just hearsay, but it's actually factual. So, but the folklore, if you will, from what I've been told all these years, and then what I've heard and what has been confirmed, and what this also confirms, is that Honky Tonk really is very significant. So here we have, for December 1st, 1956, Love Me Tender is now the big hit of Elvis Presley. You have Green Door, you have Singing the Blues. Honky Tonk is within the top 10 of nation's top tunes. It's number 9, it had been number 8, but it's been 14 weeks on the charts, but it is still reigning as one of the nation's top 10 records. So I think that's really significant to look at and to remember. Honky Tonk is, the story of Honky Tonk I need to go into too. How did it come to pass? It was in February of 1956 in Lima, Ohio. It was a nightclub gig they were preparing for, the group we were just talking about, were preparing for, and Clifford Scott from San Antonio, Texas, and Billy Butler had this bluesy idea. It was really just kind of an improv thing that they started to do and kicked around, and then they kicked it around on the dance floor. And those people who were at this event, this gig, really liked it, really liked dancing to it. You know, honky tonk piano, I mean, that's basically kind of a Texas kind of thing. So Clifford Scott is really in very important ways associated with the origin, the original origin, but it is credited as, for all band members have been credited with the origination and the writing credits. So, but what's interesting is to see it and look at the fact that it was a popular hit, an improvisation in a nightclub gig in Lima, Ohio in the winter of 1956. Kept being asked over and over and over, can you play that again? Can you play that again? Fortunately, they were great musicians and able to really redo it. I mean, it wasn't written down. And then they realized that there was such a request for this that they wrote it down, etc. and so forth. So that's a little bit the story of Honky Tonk. But it's significant that the nation's most important instrumental R&B record. It's an instrumental that is obviously jazz-inspired, jazz through and through, just as that the second tune you saw in the Dick Clark Blip Blop, that's a jazz tune. Floyd Candy Johnson, he's a jazz sax player. So, and that's an interesting thing, and it also speaks to the fact that Bill is historically a jazz player too, which we'll get to. So, next image. So, here are two images from the collection of Bill's mother and my father. And actually the second image that Paula was given to me by Shep Shepard, his drummer, who I am happy to bring greetings to you from. He's 99 and a half years old, one of the brightest, sharpest 99 and a half year olds you will ever meet. I'm still playing, and I bring him greetings, and he was very nice to share that with me, that image, which I didn't have. And of course, the other one, Bill Doggett, have an organ stylist in his trio from October 1953, when he was really just getting started. Let's look at the next image. Family images. Bill was involved with family. This is a formal photograph by a very well-known African-American journalist, photographer in Los Angeles, Harry Adams, who documented everything. Harry Adams, I don't know who, I'll just say that for the black community from the 1940s to the 70s, the photo archive of Harry Adams is one of the most significant that there is. And And Harry just happened to be my father's personal photographer. This was a photograph of the entire Doggett family. I'm going to call this Philadelphians in Los Angeles, because that's really what we were. And this is from about 1960. This was done for newspaper publication. It was an open house for our new house. We moved from a parsonage. My father was a minister, although he was originally a sax player for Bill's high school band. But my father was a minister and very significant to LA from 1954 to 64. One of the leading civil rights leaders in Los Angeles at the time, so he was able to garner a lot more press. And so that's a picture of our extended family, and is bookended by the Doggett brothers. John Doggett on the left, my father, there's my mother next, and then of course Bill on the end with Angela and his wife, and the little boy who's squinting, and I'm not crying, I'm squinting because we were in the sun, is me. And the photo is actually very poignant on a lot of different levels now, because, especially after my parents died, I'm leading this photo, and literally, and on a lot of other levels, metaphorically, I am literally the voice for all those people, many of whom have passed on. Let's go to the next slide. Another family picture. There is Bill Doggett with his brother's family, and the little boy on the lady's lap is little William, me. And then this other slide is a Polaroid that is taken with my camera. I'm going to say circa either 89 or 90. Our next slide. So who's Bill Doggett? These are more rare pictures, all rare pictures from the collection of my father and his mother. The large photo is Bill, brother Bill, Philly, 1940. That's shot by my father. Bill is all of 23 years old. In 1940, he's already in Harlem. He's already quite well established in Philadelphia between 1936 to 1940, because in 1936, while he was at Central High School in Philadelphia, he established a swing dance ensemble called the Five Majors, very popular, which was hired out for various dances and society events. And it was thought, I don't know all the membership of all five, but certainly it was anchored by the Doggett brothers, Bill on piano at the time, and my father on tenor sax. So the Five Majors. The other pictures are of family members on the left and the top. That's Bill's mother, Winola Ballard. Winola is from Georgetown, by the way. We have a lot of roots here, cousins in Georgetown. And that's young Bill Doggett. That's even earlier. I'm going to say that's, with that car, that's probably 1930. I guess Bill's maybe 21, something like that. So no one's ever, these are completely unpublished pictures. The picture on the bottom is of a family picture. It's my father on the far right, Bill in the middle, kind of in shadow, Winola, and my grandfather in North Philadelphia in their backyard at North Van Pelt Street. Both, interestingly enough, John Doggett Sr. on the end is from Norfolk, Virginia originally, and Winola Ballard from Georgetown area, but her roots were also in Fairfax, Virginia. So it's interesting that all of this is coming out of here. So let's go on to the next slide. So I've talked about the fact that Bill Doggett had this very significant piano history established in Philadelphia in the late 30s. The Five Majors was a very popular small ensemble that was hired out in Philadelphia, but Bill had, in addition to that, achieved a reputation as a sideman, as a pianist and arranger of note, not yet credited, but as a arranger of note who worked with a lot of traveling musicians. So he was in demand, which was, I think, was interesting from what I have learned. And certainly, as I said, I wish he had lived so we could have had a much deeper conversation about that. But Bill Doggett moved basically from North Philadelphia up to Harlem in 1938, working as a pianist with Jimmy Mundy. Jimmy Mundy Orchestra at that time he was forming a new orchestra. Jimmy Mundy was perhaps similar to Jimmy Lunsford, but not having the same reputation as Jimmy Lunsford, or let's say Claude Hopkins, or some of these other, I guess you would say, by comparative, second tier compared to like Count Basie or or Duke Ellington or Cab Calloway at the time, or Fletcher Henderson as well. But Bill, at the age of essentially 23, 24, is in Harlem, has arrived in Harlem, and has arrived not only with the Jimmy Monday Orchestra, and has actually his first recording is a studio recording on the 78 that no one has seen with Jimmy Monday, but he also has this connection and meets up with a very important name in jazz that I think you'll see more of, and that name is Lucky Millinder. Lucky Millinder at this time in 1930, I'm going to say 1939, 38, 39, is already fronting Mills Blue Rhythm Band, and a popular band at the time. There is this very interesting story of how Bill Doggett leaves Jimmy Monday, but he's also got his own ensemble that's in an enlarged version of the Five Majors, which my father is not in. That's another story. But somehow there's this folklore of how Bill Doggett decides to sell his band to Lucky Millinder for a song, so to speak, but with the understanding that he would be the house pianist and then the arranger. So technically, that's what happened. So here you have a picture from a recording. This is a studio picture that's often seen, but rarely shown. It's often seen in certain publications, but I have not had the opportunity to see it. It's coming. Actually, it's from an album cover, the record from the LP era, I think in the 70s, that showcased the music of Lucky Millinder Orchestra during the time when my uncle was the pianist. So here he is, young, 23-year-old, in the Savoy Ballroom. So before we go to the next slide, I want to talk about, just briefly, the fact that one other thing that my uncle never talked about was that he had his film debut in 1940, technically 1939, but the film was shot in 39, but it was actually released in 1940. Paradise in Harlem. It's an all-black cast, kind of a musical and kind of a spoof murder mystery kind of thing, but it's mostly about entertainment. So we'll see just a little bit of this. But here is the young Bill Doggett, 23, no, maybe 22. You'll see him in cameo at the piano. And when you hear the opening credits to this film, there you hear the piano sound of Bill Doggett, which is kind of like, perhaps like Teddy Wilson a little bit, or maybe like Claude Hopkins, since we're talking about jazz piano. So let's go to the next slide, which is Paradise in Harlem.
talk to you, baby. You broke my heart from the start, now you know I'm bound. I gotta put you down. I love you truly, then you went away. I love you truly, but now, my dear, it's all I say. Ain't I giving you all my love? Now ain't you my little thing now? Then either prove it or remove it, cause I'm going to town. I got to put you down.
You can see Bill Doggett right there, nodding his head and looking towards me at the moment. That's why I never talk about this song.
Truly, but now, my dear, that's all I say. Then either prove it or remove it, cause I'm going to town. I got to put you down. I got to put you down. We got to put you down. I got to put you down. We got to put you down. Then either prove it or remove it, cause we going to town. I gotta put you down.
I think we should probably stop it there. Well, there's more dancing coming. So we need to stop it, and we'll go to the next image, which is actually is this. There's more film to come, so sorry to. That's actually, by the way, I just interject here. That was downloaded from YouTube. I actually have the film on DVD, which I'm going to work with a videographer I work with in California to actually have transfer the original so it's sharper. But I have this slide particular for a reason. This is a very significant juxtaposition. It's one I spoke on all last year in Pittsburgh, and I'm proud of that. And I spoke about, I was a featured presenter twice in Pittsburgh for the Billy Strayhorn Centennial. William Strayhorn and William Doggett have way too much in common. It's a story that's not been talked about or even thought about. Bill Doggett was born 3 months after Billy Strayhorn. Billy Strayhorn was technically born in Akron, Ohio, but his home was considered to be Pittsburgh. Like Billy Strayhorn, Bill Doggett, or William Doggett, was a musical prodigy. Wasn't originally going to be a pianist. Was actually wanted to be a trumpeter, but Doggett family, we didn't have the money. But William Strayhorn and William Doggett both were piano prodigies in high school, both of them having ensembles. Billy was Strayhorn was much more the composer. In fact, the reason I'm putting this up, we're talking about jazz and jazz archives. I have also a jazz archive of really notable jazz 70s rare stuff. And part of my conversation about during the Billy Strayhorn Centennial was to talk about the fact that both of these musicians, one from Pittsburgh, the other from neighboring Philadelphia, both end up in Harlem in 1939. One working as a pianist and arranger for Duke Ellington, the other for Lucky Millinder. Here we have two of their early tunes. They're showing credit, but there's more to it. They didn't just write the music, they wrote more. But the record companies and their bosses had their names in it. Something to Live For is the first recording, it predates Take the A Train. It's the first recording of a Billy Strayhorn song with Duke Ellington. It comes from his 1935 Pittsburgh High School musical, very popular musical called Fantastic Rhythm. Actually, Billy Strayhorn wrote the lyrics and the music, but yet in this first recording, Jean Eldridge is the female vocal. I think she's replaced Ivy Anderson. Here in 1940 is Savoy. Bill Doggett, of course, is playing at the Savoy Ballroom with Lucky Milner, which is at that time pretty much the house band after Chick Webb. So this is interesting too. So I share that just to talk about the issue of challenge and of talent, that the difficulty of young pianists trying to make a name for themselves then, and obviously now still the issue of getting credit is a big deal. But the next image, the next piece we're going to see is more dancing, and it's also downloaded from YouTube. The quality is good, but it could be better. But the good news, it's something really fun. It's called a Soundie. Soundies were promotional films made to promote a new record, kind of like an MTV video, predating MTV video. And it's called 4 or 5 Times and features the girl singer for Lucky Milner at the time, the great Rosetta Tharpe, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, early on. And it also have a really wonderful cameo of the young Bill Doggett. This is dated from about 1941, so let's take a look.
You got to see the young Bill Doggett. You know, it's really interesting. I don't know how it is, but I'm glad I'm the publicist. I think my uncle saw in the late '80s when I was talking to him about something yet. Well, I guess I should mention it now. When I was working in radio in LA as a photographer, but a lot of people, the sales thought I should be in the sales department. But I was working as a in-house photographer for a couple of, or actually 3 very high-profile top 40 record stations. And because of the name, and you know, we're talking 1986, 87, so we're talking 30 years after Honky Tonk. You know, it was much fresher than it is even now, 30 years later. And people just said, "So, Bill Doggett, and you're not related to people." Yeah, of course, yeah, all my life, right? So it was an idea, one in particular, very famous at the time radio station for oldies, KERTH in Los Angeles had an annual summertime oldies showcase of older 50s people. So it was interesting that I talked about all these different things about what we marketing him. I just wish that he had shared so much more that now I'm talking about after he's gone. So I'm glad at least I have that. So moving forward, so you saw Bill Doggett, the early bit, the jazz Bill Doggett. Well, the jazz Bill Doggett continues, of course, but in the 40s, after he leaves, there's more to the story, but we're going to start here. I'm going to start at Louis Jordan. This is something that most people aren't aware of, that Bill Doggett actually became the pianist for Louis Jordan from 1947 to 51. These are images of 2 CDs that I think are still available on Amazon. I have them when Tower Records used to be around. So, but he was a headliner for Louis Jordan. But the Louis Jordan piece is more significant because of the fact that how does Bill Doggett come to Louis Jordan? He comes to Louis Jordan for the next one because of this man, the house pianist for Louis Jordan, Bill Davis, or Wild Bill Davis, who was with Louis Jordan essentially during his early height of 1945 to 47, but decides during this time period that he wants to be creative and he wants to work and experiment with the new Hammond organ. And he has this idea that he can do the Hammond organ and take it on the road and create a ensemble that he feels will be popular as a standalone ensemble. That had not been done before. Yes, of course, we had Fats Waller doing jazz organ, but jazz organ mostly in church and jazz organ in the late 20s for Victor Records in his own arrangement, but not as a standalone ensemble, as a popular ensemble, just as, let's say, like the Benny Goodman Sextet would have been, or small group. But Bill Davis has this idea, and it's because of this opening, because that Bill Doggett is uniquely known as a sideman, and during this time period he's choosing to be, like, I'm going to use a sports term, be a free agent. And so he's left Lucky Millender, he's doing other stuff which I'll talk about. But it's Wild Bill Davis who becomes his mentor, this jazz organ mentor. And so that is the story of how how Bill Doggett comes to Louis Jordan. And he signatures, as does Wild Bill Davis, an important kind of pioneering sound, which we'll hear next. Should play it. Nope. Should play it. We have the sound in the flash drive, so we can do that. Let's go to say Doggett in the flash drive where we're at. So we can listen to it. Doggett, it's going to say Lemonade, right there, you pass it through. Lemonade, that one. Yeah. So this is the young Bill Doggett, jazz organ pioneer, circa 1949 with Louis Jordan, and it's this style that begins the journey.
Yes, I'm looking for a chick that only drinks lemonade. Yes, I'm looking for a chick that only drinks lemonade. I haven't found one yet, but I've been told that a few was made. Now you know the type, and I know them too. They stand at the bar drinking 10-cent brew. You ask them what they're drinking, though you already know. They'll say whiskey every time to make you spend your dough. That's why I'm looking for a gal that only drinks lemonade. I haven't found one yet, but I've been told that a few was made. I met a gal I thought was so fine. I begged her to please, please, baby, be mine. I took her out one Thursday night. She got 2 shots of joy juice and was ready to fight. That's why I'm looking for a gal that only drinks lemonade. I haven't found one yet, but I've been told that a few was made. Whiskey's too powerful for a woman's frame. It'll make some simple and it makes other chicks insane. It can make a girl weighing 104 feel so powerful she'll think she could even whip Joe. This I know to be a solid fact, 'cause I fell for one a little while back. She was so sweet at the start of the night, but after 2 drinks, was nothing right. That's why I'm looking for a chick that only drinks lemonade. I'm tired of being broke the day after I get paid.
That's Bill Doggett at the dawn of Bill Doggett as a jazz organist. Pretty interesting stuff, pretty dynamic stuff. No one really was doing that. That was kind of original at that time, and you could see the roots of the jazz organ as a jazz organ combo to come from that. So the next one, the next story, the next image after this is actually one that I want to talk about, and then there's also another song after that, and it should play, but if it doesn't, we have it in the PowerPoint. That's always double prepare. This is the story of the evening as far as I'm concerned around Bill Doggett. This is something he never, ever talked about in our family. I discovered it later. I heard about it from other people that knew him, but he never talked about it, and I don't know how. Bill Doggett and Ella Fitzgerald are hugely connected. Ella Fitzgerald, of course, is famous, becomes famous when Chick Webb picks her out. And of course, it's with Chick Webb that she comes to, she's on her top. You don't want to go there yet. Back to the other slide. But what's interesting is that Ella Fitzgerald, Bill Doggett, and the Ink Spots are all Decca record artists. And they are all part of the Gale Agency, which is a public relations agency. Well, circa, let's say, 1942-43, Ella Fitzgerald she's, after Chick has passed, she's taken on and created her own band, Ella Fitzgerald and her Savoy. It doesn't really sell records that well. The Ink Spots are doing okay. They have some famous hits, but they run into a slow patch too. So the Gale Agency has this idea of, and Decca agrees, to pair Ella Fitzgerald with Ink Spots. Well, guess what? The free agent, Bill Doggett, pianist, is also part of the Gale Agency, and since he's coincidentally a Decca record artist, he ends up joining the Ink Spots as pianist in several recordings where he's arranged them. He's not credited, kind of like Billy Strayhorn. He didn't get credit for being the arranger, but some of the key hits, I don't have the names of which ones, but some key hits of the Ink Spots are actually Bill Doggett arrangements. What's significant also about this picture going forward is that in the extended 45 of Smooth Sailing, Bill Doggett, because of this connection, also has the opportunity to connect much more deeply with Ella Fitzgerald circa 1943-44. Bill Doggett never talked about this. He was Ella Fitzgerald's pianist and music director from 1943 to 44. This is during the period when Ella is perhaps not quite who she would become. She's famous, of course, through Chick Webb, but there's this intermediary period where she's kind of okay. But it's by 1950-51, she's still a Decca artist, as you see here. But isn't it interesting that Bill and Ella are still connected, and Ella decides for her new session she wants to have organ. So what happens in 1951? This is very interesting. That her 3 top hits, Smooth Sailing, Rough Riding, and Airmail Special, all feature Bill Doggett, all are Bill Doggett arrangements, and are her big hits. Who knew? Bill never talked about it. I'm glad to talk about it. The next slide should play. If it doesn't, we have it in
It's a really amazing song. You hear it? Okay. It's in the flash. It's in the flash drive under Doggett, Ella. These things happen sometimes, unfortunately. Doggett, Ella, Sailing. That one, the second one, right there. Let's listen to it. This is an amazing tune. This is Ella at her scatting, early scatting. Who knew? That was her big hit of 1951. Smooth Sailing. She also had Rough Riding and Airmail Special during the same time period, 51-52. This is Bill Doggett and Ella Fitzgerald. And the next one, we may also have the same issue. You know, I have a brand new computer. Sometimes this happens. The PowerPoints aren't always compatible from computer to computer. So, but the next one is, before we run that image, I want to talk about it. And that is in 1961, when I was a little boy, Ella Fitzgerald had another idea about her old friend Bill Doggett. She actually had Norman Granz. She's moved from Decca now to, Verve, I think it is, the Norman Granz label. And she has, for her new record, which was to be her stereo demonstration record, one of those stereorama things with the extreme stereo sound, she decides that she wants to have Bill Doggett. Not so much play organ on it, but this time, he's going to do all of the arrangements, and he's going to conduct. It's called Rhythm Is My Business. The song that I'm sampling is one of many standards that are on it that Bill Doggett arranged. This is Running Wild. I don't know if it will play in the next image, but this is another underknown It plays on my computer, but it doesn't. We have it embedded into we have it the next one on the little list that we were just playing. That we have that on that. If you go to the Lexar, the Bill Doggett Ella Running. That's the one. Good. Who knew Bill Doggett was Nelson Meadows?
I'm running wild, lost control, running wild, mighty bold, feeling gay, reckless too, carefree mind all the time, never blue. I'm always going, don't know where, always showing, 'cause I don't care, don't love nobody, it's not worthwhile. All alone, I'm running wild. Running wild, yes, running wild, feeling gay, reckless too, carefree mind all the time, never blue. Always going, don't know where, always showing, 'cause I don't care, don't love nobody, it's not worthwhile. All alone, running wild, I'm running wild, lost control, mighty bold, feeling gay, reckless too, every mind all the time, never blue. I'm always going, don't know where, always showing, 'cause I don't care, don't love nobody, it's not worthwhile. Running wild, running wild. I lost my head, my heart, my soul, all over you.
Who knew? Bill Doggett is a good arranger, and that trumpet, that high trumpet you heard, is Bill Doggett and my father, the Doggett brothers' longtime friend, and the close childhood friend of Bill Doggett's drummer, Shep Shepherd, all of whom were in Philadelphia together in the 30s. But that was Joe Wilder. Joe Wilder, that story is yet another story all of itself, but isn't it so interesting that my father was at Mass Bound Conservatory in 1936-37. Joe Wilder was there at the same time, as was Shep Shepherd. Shep Shepherd was in my father's class. My father was in tenor sax and in flute, and he actually got a scholarship for his music skills, but unfortunately at that time he was not able to go to, or to proceed on to, he actually wanted to play classical flute, which this is a story he shared with me. But at that time, there was not in Philadelphia, a Philadelphia Junior Orchestra that accepted colored musicians at that time, as was the case with at Curtis, unfortunately at that time. But he went on to still play. My father, till his ending days, he died and passed in 2011, played sax. So, but it's interesting to look at the interconnections, the history that I am very fortunate to be a storyteller for, so to speak. So let's go on to this. Of course, this is, unfortunately, I don't think I embedded this in the track in this, but I can speak to it. The song that you may not be able to hear, unfortunately, is what is it? I think it is Don't Get Around Much Anymore. It's a great track. I just had not envisioned that I would have this issue. I knew about maybe with the Ella and the Louis Jordan, but not with the others. But it happens. But the what I want to say about this is that you're just seeing it from my collection. These are the three Duke Ellington EPs that he made. They actually had a full-size 12-inch hi-fi LP on King Records. This is, I believe, from 1957. But it's all Ellington, and my uncle, interestingly enough, had to have known Ellington. I didn't, he never talked about it, but he was a great fan of Ellington's music, performed it quite a lot. And what's interesting about this particular version, it's you really get not only the music, but you really want to get out there and go get up and dance. It's a great version of Do Nothing Till You Hear About Me. So, excuse me, wrong song. Don't Get Around Much Anymore. I knew I was having a moment there. It's Don't Get Around Much Anymore. It's a song that I sampled. There may be songs that we may not be able to hear, but there's other stuff that's coming, so we won't, just life happens. But it's interesting because, of course, both the Doggett brothers were in Washington, D.C. in the 30s, and of course Ellington is originally from here. So let's go on to the next image. Okay, this is talking about the ever-evolving styles of Bill Doggett. Unfortunately, this is not on my flash drive. This is Wow, which is a real mod-sounding track. It's Bill Doggett after King Records. He's on ABC Paramount. This is available maybe 2 years ago, newly as a CD, and is available on Amazon. What's really cool about this particular song, Wow, is it's very mod. It's this response to the mod era, kind of the post-Beatles era, but also it's this response to Jimmy Smith, to the ascendancy of Jimmy Smith. So it's a very jazz, it's a mix of jazz and pop. It's kind of a blended genre, but it's a great song, and I hope that you'll have a chance. It's actually on my website, BillDoggett.Centennial.com. You can hear that song on the website. So the next one, again, we may have some issues here coming, but hopefully not too much. I want to talk about James Brown. James Brown also is a big name, important part of Bill Doggett's legacy. James Brown and Bill Doggett were together on King Records in Cincinnati in the late 50s. It is actually a case of passing the torch, if you will, that King Records actually is famously moved forward in the mid-50s, from 55 to 58 with Bill Doggett's music, but it's the young James Brown that really takes the mantle forward. But he always talked about how significant Bill Doggett was to him, and in his book, which is shown here, he speaks about how much of an influence Bill had on him. And of course, Bill Doggett was influenced by James Brown conversely, and in the early 70s, in 1971, 72, recorded this really funky album called Honky Tonk Popcorn. And interesting enough, in the next slide, which I don't think, unfortunately we won't be able to hear it, James Brown does a version of Honky Tonk, which is really funky. So there's this mutual admiration society. So anyway, but we'll go on to the next thing. Does it play? I don't know if it will play. No, it should autoplay. No, that's fine. But that's the image. You can see the image of Honky Tonk Popcorn on King with the James Brown production. So James Brown produced this. So this is Honky Tonk Popcorn, the James Brown's song, performed by Bill Doggett. And here on below is on when James Brown's left King Records. James Brown has done Honky Tonk Part 1 with the James Brown Soul Train group of 1972. It's classic I'm Black and I'm Proud era James Brown. And unfortunately, it plays on my computer fine, but unfortunately, I guess the PowerPoints aren't always interchangeable. Let's go on. Let's see what we have. Let's go on to the next slide. Oh, yes. Can we stop? Can we back up for a second before we go to this? Okay. So this is an interesting next... Let's stop that. Yeah, just leave it there for now. Okay. As I mentioned before, I'm a member of the Association for Recorded Sound Collections. And in May of this year, for the 50th anniversary, conference at University of Indiana at Bloomington. I had the opportunity to be one of their featured speakers. And I spoke on a topic that I'm going to basically speak on tonight, a little bit more abbreviated, obviously, that Bill Doggett, the rock and roll and R&B Bill Doggett, is very much involved with, which is the era of rock and roll, and the era of rock and roll being a challenge, an earthquake to American idea of music and society. So this film, there are two film sequences, both they're short, they're only 5 minutes, that speak to that and that really look at and pave the way for the understanding of American music and the challenge to American music and ideology at the 1955-56, but also have an interesting resonance for today on other levels. So let's begin to take a look at it. It's a great little video. It will speak for itself.
Well, now that's all right now, mama. That's all right for you. That's all right, baby. Any way you do, now that's all right. That's all right. That's all right now, mama. Any way you do. Well, you sneaked off in my kitchen, eat up all my bread. Soon my back was turned, you diddling in my bed, but that's all right. That's all right. That's all right now, mama. Any way you do. Well, my mama, she done told me, daddy told me too. This woman you got, son, I ain't no friend to you, but that's all right. That's all right. That's all right now, mama. Any way you do.
To the camp and tell my brother Bill.
In the South, the predominant music of blacks was country blues, directly descended from work songs and old-time spirituals sung by their slave grandparents.
And then I looked around.
The blues gave expression to the black man's hardships, as well as offering a means of escape from them.
Hey, 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 Lord, Lord, hey, Lord. Hey, hey, Lord, Lord, Lord.
Few Southern blacks ever dreamed of making a living from their music. In fact, there was no place in the South where a black man could even make a record, until a white radio engineer named Sam Phillips opened the Memphis recording service.
Nigger and the white man can't set him up. The nigger beat the white man, scared to figure it out. He had to what? He had to party up and go. Where your high power women show got to.
Phillips eventually started his own record company called Sun, and continued to record blues singers. But all along he kept thinking, if only I could find a white man who had the Negro sound and the Negro feel. Some Southern musicians, however, had begun to incorporate the blues into their country sound. One of them was a 19-year-old Memphis truck driver who spent all his free time hanging around Sam Phillips' studio.
That's different. That's a pop song now,
When Elvis Presley first walked into the Sun studio, he knew he was special. Elvis told Sam Phillips he didn't sing like nobody. And he was right.
Well, that's all right, mama. That's all right for you. That's all right, mama. Just any way you do. That's all right. That's all right, mama. Any way you do. Well, I wish she done told me. Papa done told me too. Son, that guy you fooling with, she ain't no.
Elvis Presley's first record, That's All Right, caught Memphis by surprise. Sam Phillips had found his man. Now he had to make him a star.
The young Elvis heard the blues on Memphis front porches and on WLAC from people like Arthur Big Boy Crudup, who'd recorded the original That's All Right Mama.
It was just tough times back in those days.
America soon discovered Sam Cove Street, that white man with a Negro feel and a Negro beat.
You ain't nothing but a hound. Been snooping around the door. You ain't nothing but a hound dog. Been snooping around the door. You can wag your tail, but I ain't gonna feed you no more.
So, in my prepared remarks, the question is it Elvis or is it Big Mama Thornton? Is it Arthur Crudup or is it Elvis? It's All Right Mama, Hound Dog, The Great Pretender, and Johnny Be Good, to be featured later, are songs with pointed lyrics that can also be viewed as songs with coded messages like the Negro Spiritual during the Underground Railroad. Lyrics that were coded for understanding by African Americans and otherwise oblivious to others. It's All Right Mama, Hound Dog, The Great Pretender of the Platters, and the original lyrics of Johnny Be Good, which were a colored boy, then changed for other reasons to a country boy. The original lyrics of Johnny Be Good form a Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill-like paradigm of irony that must also be viewed in the larger context of political meaning, as songs sourced out of and spoken directly from their Jim Crow, segregation, social, cultural context. In this context, It's All Right, Hound Dog, The Great Pretender, Johnny Be Good speak in veiled tones with similarities to Mac the Knife, Pirate Jenny, which was iconically done by Nina Simone, Alabama Song, Song of Mandalay from the Three-Penny Opera, The Rise and Fall of the City of Mahagoni, and Happy End. Rock and roll, next image, rock and roll at 60, the critical year of 1956 meets 2016. Both years and decades convulsive with social, cultural, and political changes which shake to the core social and cultural norms of a country that, on the surface, had been neatly ordered and organized by laws such as segregation. Segregation and Jim Crow encouraged a paradigm of the sainted and rightfulness of a Jim Crow world of law and order, neatly applied not only to the myriad of rural towns and countrysides in the Deep South, but also deeply embedded by the fabric of an American consciousness. 1956 would be ushered in, next slide, by the earthquake of a rise of social revolution of 1955. 1955, if we've seen in the video, witnessed a Chicago teenager named Emmett Till who came south to visit relatives during the summer and would suffer a sensationally notorious death at the hands of the Ku Klux Klan, covered by the national media. December 1955 would push the envelope further with the emergence of Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. Both events would kick-start a social revolution that could not be quelled. 1955 would give rise to a young freedom movement known as the Civil Rights Movement, led by the young preacher named Martin Luther King. This young freedom movement would give voice to millions of disenfranchised Americans who had been denied an equal chance to participate in the American dream. The Young Freedom Movement, which announced itself in 1955 and 1956, the year of honky tonk, the year of Elvis, had its roots 10 years earlier after the end of World War II, which left millions of American families impacted forever. It was, and remains America forever changed at the end of World War II, and in particular the state of conscientious objection to the status quo of returning African American servicemen, such as the Tuskegee Airmen,
the 92nd Infantry Division, and those on the home front, such as in the Bay Area, the Port Chicago 50, who refused to accept the status quo of third-class citizenship that set in motion institutional earthquakes, including President Truman's 1948 executive order, which desegregated the armed forces. These social earthquakes would directly impact the core of American life as well as the world of American music. At the center of rock and roll, which we are talking about tonight and looking at Honky Tonk in 60 years, in its 60-year anniversary right now. At the core, at the epicenter of rock and roll is rhythm and blues. Here we see in this image the classic Louis Jordan, which before my uncle joined as pianist. This is the classic Louis Jordan of 1944, 45, 46. The songs Choo Choo Boogie, That Chick's Too Young to Fry. We heard Lemonade. Of course, there are other Saturday Night Fish Fry. There's what else? The famous one, Let the Good Times Roll. These are all Louis Jordan rhythm and blues songs that really, in a very important way, anchor the world of rock and roll to come. I think next slide. Again, these are from my collection. I have a pretty impressive archive of jazz collectibles. That's the Rhythm and Blues with Fats Domino. I think that's from July '55. We can go yet to the next slide. Yeah, rock and roll, the music, its roots, its rhythms, and its performers were considered by many Americans as devil music and a moral corrupting threat and dagger aimed at the heart of white teenage America. Rock and roll was, in its origin and its coded meaning, a moral call to race mixing and destructive miscegenation, so brilliantly messaged in warning calls to white America in 1915 by D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, and underscored in 1939 by Margaret Mitchell's landmark Oscar movie-inspiring novel Gone with the Wind. The hype around this scurrilous plague of rock and roll was very much like the propaganda directed towards teenagers in the 1930s around reefer madness, cocaine and the drug and jive culture promulgated by Cab Calloway. The same could be said about the cartoon studio coming out of Hollywood, the corrupting, quote-unquote, Hollywood filmmakers Dave and Max Fleischer, who in essence promoted immorality to American children, according to the 1950s ideas, on a grand commercial scale by this character, this cartoon character called Betty Boop. As we see in the slide here, we see the book All Shook Up, How Rock and Roll Changed America by Glenn Altshuler from 2003. He details the following, quote, rock and roll became the target of Southern segregationists vehemently opposed to the 1954 Supreme Court decision, Brown versus Topeka, a decision which invalidated the all-important foundation of Southern cultural and political status quo, which was the 1891 Jim Crow separate but equal laws. These segregationists believe race mixing led to miscegenation, the cultural taboo of interracial marriage and mixed-race children, and that exposure to black culture promoted juvenile delinquency and sexual immorality. Next slide. Asa Carter, a former talk show radio host and a member of the Ku Klux Klan Clavin number 31, used the thread of rock and roll, used the thread of Bill Doggett, Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Laverne Baker, the Platters, etc. Used the thread of rock and roll to enhance his status as a leader of the white councils in Alabama by lumping together rock and roll, bebop, blues, quote-unquote, Congo rhythms, and jungle music, unquote. Carter got attention of Newsweek and the New York Times. Here is one of those emblematic messages. This was a flyer. I have several originals of this from a collector who shared them with me. From the Citizens Council of Greater New Orleans Incorporated, their building, their actual address and all that, permission granted to reprint and this circular. Notice, stop, help save the youth of America, don't buy Negro records. Quote unquote, in parentheses, if you don't want to serve Negroes in your place of business, then do not have Negro records on your jukebox or listen to Negro records on the radio. End of quote, end of parentheses. The screaming, idiotic words and savage music of these records are undermining the morals of our white youth in America. Call the advertisers of the radio stations that play this type of music and complain to them. Don't let your children buy or listen to these Negro records. Of course, that did happen. And going forward, Asa Carter had these views printed in the New York Times and Newsweek of the period. Quote, rock and roll is an assault on white America by the basic heavy beat music of the Negroes. It appeals to the basin man, brings out animalism and vulgarity. Their roots were in the heart of Africa, where it was used to incite warriors to such a frenzy that by nightfall, neighbors were cooked in carnage. The music is designed, reversion to savagery, part of, I love this, an NAACP plot to mongrelize America, unquote. Rock and roll music must be purged from jukeboxes and record shops throughout the South. And of course we have this slide. Yet, next slide. And here we have, interesting enough, this is from an original, I'm trying to remember if this is from Dig magazine, has the rhythm of death invaded America, voodoo beat, blamed for teenage riots coast to coast, as music maddened maniacs mauled many. This is really, I mean, it's serious. I mean, they were very serious about this particular point of view that, you know, race mixing, which rock and roll promoted, was communism. Rock and roll is an NAACP plot, you know, the rhythm of death, etc. So it's interesting to look at this social cultural element juxtaposed to the rise of rock and roll. This is also the era, we must remember, of Joseph McCarthy and the House of Un-American Activities. It's amazing that R&B and doo-wop and rock and roll and the whole world that we're celebrating and remembering tonight was able to survive. So the next slide. Yet in the mix of this dark cloud of Southern reaction, there emerged a bright spot, a particular story of rock and roll worth noting, the story of Sid Nathan and King Records at Brewster Street, Cincinnati. At the height of segregation in the northern segregated city of Cincinnati, Ohio, a Jewish entrepreneur created a record company called King Records. Next slide. King Records was, go to the next slide after this, was the first integrated record company in the country, a record company located in the heart of Cincinnati's black community, owned, as I said, by a Jewish entrepreneur who embraced the concept of an integrated workforce way before it was popular. As early as the late 1940s, Nathan believed that the people that lived in the community where his business was located could be part of the success of his business. Next slide. Okay. King Records began, actually, is interesting, as this label will show, King Records actually began in the late 40s as a hillbilly country label, but with the popularity of Louis Jordan and the vocal harmony groups skyrocketing in 46, 47. You can go to the next slide. King added, this was one of those popular groups, Moon Mulligans, hillbilly. Next slide. But with, you know, the popularity, the soaring, and particularly, who am I thinking? Let's get his name wrong. Good Rocking Tonight is Wynonie Harris. I know if I saved the record, I would remember the name of the artist. Wynonie Harris was a headliner before Bill Doggett and before Earl Bostic. It's Wynonie Harris's Good Rocking Tonight that really kicks forward and kicks off it's actually rock and roll. It's still considered R&B, but it's really, you know, the genesis of rock and roll. That Sid Nathan is a marketing whiz and gets into this idea that he's going to keep his hillbilly base, but he's also going to add this sepia. So not so much necessarily as a well, obviously segregation in terms of how he's done it, but at least he's done it and shown it, and it's not been, you know, rejected. So you have on one side the hillbilly hip parade, and you have the other side the sepia hip parade. Next slide. One of those sepia hit people, you've heard about Lucky Milner. Lucky Milner comes to King Records, interesting enough. Forward, next slide. Okay, Federal Records is yet another label. And a very important label. It's a label in which all of the doo-wop groups debut on. Particularly most famous is Hank Ballard and the Midnighters. Next slide. These is two of the famous songs from the era, Work With Me Annie by the Royals and 60-Minute Man by the Dominoes. Next slide. The backside of the marketing piece. You have Earl Bostic, Tiny Bradshaw, Bill Doggett. All their records are advertised, and then on the other side, Sonny Thompson, Billy Ward, and the Dominoes. Queen Records is yet another division of King Records. And the next image, this is particularly African-American focused, Bull Moose Jackson, jamming and jumping. a song by Lucky Milner. Isn't it interesting how Lucky Milner is a thread throughout this whole conversation we're having tonight? Next slide. King Records, the blue label, famous blue label, and this is the label of the late 50s, from 56 forward, and this is the label on which Honky Tonk is associated with. Next image. In the back slide, and Lord Bill Doggett is a headliner, along with others. Next slide. But the real story here that is really important and unique when we talk about King Records is this one, which is that when Sid, it was the fact that the King, that one of the bright spots in terms of integration, one of the unique and legacy pieces of King Records, my uncle's primary label, had to do with the issue of race and integration, and at the height of segregation, the ascendancy of a singular name, Henry Glover. Henry Glover, when Sid Nathan hired Henry Glover, a black trumpeter who had been associated, interestingly enough, with Lucky Milner, and had also been a composer in the late 40s, Glover would become the first and only black A&R person in the record industry, long before Berry Gordy and early Motown. It was, at first, an inconceivable first, to have a black man occupy such a critical role of importance within any record company, independent or mainstream. In addition to A&R work, which Glover did, he also produced sessions and actually composed a vocal version of Honky Tonk, which you saw in the image in the video earlier. He also wrote music and oversaw the building of King Records' first recording studio. Among the most famous, let's go to the next slide. Okay, among the most famous King Records rhythm and blues classics included, of course, as I mentioned before, Wynonie Harris's Good Rockin' Tonight, the 60-Minute Man by the Dominoes, Work With Me, and these are all really major rock and roll doo-wop hits. Fever, another, if, you know, people think of Peggy Lee and Fever. It's actually Little Willie John brought Fever to us, and that was a huge hit for him. And then, of course, Honky Tonk, in particular, Honky Tonk Part 2. So let's go to the next slide and see if we get this to work. Yes. For those who came in late, you didn't have a chance to see this, this should open up. But it is not. We'll listen to it. There's a video behind that normally plays on my computer, but it's not here. But you'll hear this. But we'll hear a little bit of it anyway. It's a repeat of what we saw in the opening video. Does the next one play? This is Satellite Baby, which is a great piece. And next time I'll just have to add that to the sound files, just in case we have this problem again. Satellite Baby is done in 1957. It is, because it is done by Roosevelt Sykes, it is a great hit. You can listen to it on the website. It is 1957 and is a response to Bill Doggett's Honky Tonk. It's an amazing piece. It is a copy, literally, but a fun copy. It's a really good piece. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide. And so 1957 also sees, in spite of the fact that Roosevelt Sykes was a Satellite Baby with great lyrics, has picked up on the Honky Tonk success. Bill Doggett continues to be a headliner. And of course, the 60th anniversary of the big show of 1957 is actually next year. And who's in this show that travels all around the country? Fats Domino, Bill Doggett, Laverne Baker, Clyde McPhatter, the Five Keys, the Five Sads, Chuck Berry, Schoolboys, Eddie Cooley, and the Dimples. What a show. Charles Brown, Moonglows, Ann Cole, and Paul Williamson's orchestra. And here's the program. I actually have this in my collection. So it's a great, great, great experience. Let's go to the next slide. And of course, as I said again, there's, if you will, a torch relay going on by 1958-59. You have Bill Doggett, still very popular, but the new hit, the national hit person that arrives to King Records. And King Records really is, all during this time, from 1947, where Wynonie Harris is doing Good Rockin' Tonight, all the way through to 1971-72. It's the R&B Motown of the 1950s. And of course, very importantly, the home of James Brown, the young James Brown and his Blue Flames. Please, please, please try me. Forward to, of course, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. I Feel Good. It's all King Records. People don't realize how significant King Records is. And on the back of this back cover, which I have showcased, you see all the different headliners, and there are two of the key records of Bill Doggett as well. So I think we can go on to the next, which I hope is, yes, a very important piece which we can hold on. So, and we're coming close to our ending, just so you know. The critical element that has to be talked about, which I've already talked about a little bit, but I really need to address as the story, as we look at honky tonk and Bill Doggett in particular, at the dawn of rock and roll, which is really, in my opinion, 1955-56. Honky tonk is recorded in June of 1956, 60 years ago this year, but its ascendancy is now September of 1956 or September of 2006, 60 years ago, all the fall of 1956. What is significant is that emerges with this story is the importance story of America's youth, black, white, Latino, and Asian American. Like their predecessors in the 1920s, the youth of the Flapper and Charleston age who rejected the state's social traditions of their pre-World War I parents and embraced everything jazz and new, like the youth of the late Depression era who embraced this new music called swing, and its dance form, the jitterbug, the tradition of embracing the new, transfigured into the 1950s. It was America's youth, America's teenagers who reconfigured, let's go to the next slide, please, who reconfigured as well as redefined America's cultural consciousness, escorted forward by key progressive radio DJs like Alan Freed and radio stations like WLAC, who brought to the airways a music that could not be repressed by vigilante Southern white segregationists. Let's go to the next slide. Additionally, it is the alliance of an unstoppable movement for social and cultural change advanced forward by African Americans at the dawn of the Civil Rights Movement, in combination with a popular form of music called rock and roll, that began a process of destroying the artificial glass ceilings, these iron curtains set in motion after World War I and World War II. Yet it is not only the black and white youth of 1954, but fast forward, as we see in this image, the youth of 1960 to 64 who would set in motion a total challenge to the status quo. As freedom riders on the buses of 1961, next slide, as sit-in and, next slide, lunch counter demonstrators in 1961 and 62, and in, next slide, 1964 Freedom Summer volunteers helping Southern blacks register to vote. It is America's youth who challenged and changed the nation and how it viewed itself. Indeed, as pictured here in the bottom, Glenn Altshuler's book is aptly titled, All Shook Up, How Rock and Roll Changed America. Let's view aspects of the teenager and how the teenager changes how we feel about ourselves, how we see ourselves, how Bill Doggett, Little Richard, Bo Diddley, Fats Domino helped to shake up America and shake up the world of American music that was to come. Hopefully this video, one of these videos work. Next one.
the pre-integrated Dick Clark American Bandstand.
Whatever you call it, rhythm and blues continued to evolve as more musicians picked up the rock and roll beat. One of these was another chess artist, Bo Diddley, whose distinctive guitar style became his trademark.
With a guitar beside him in his Ford pickup, another young musician drove up to Chicago in 1955 from his home in the South.
Deep down in Louisiana, close to New Orleans, way back up in the woods among the evergreens, there stood a log cabin made of earth and wood, where lived a country boy named Johnny B. Good, who never ever learned to read or write so well, but he could play the guitar just like a ringing a bell. Go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go.
For a number of years, the Negro passengers on the city bus lines of Montgomery
December
have been
1955.
humiliated, intimidated, and faced threats on this bus line. Just the other day, one of the fine citizens of our community, Mrs. Rosa Parks, was arrested because she refused to give up her seat for a white passenger.
The 8 children and the adults with them were turned away by the National Guard. The 9th student, Elizabeth Eckford, had missed the call to gather with the others before school. Elizabeth Eckford walked alone and met a mob.
Deep down in Louisiana, close to New Orleans, way back up in the woods among the evergreens, there stood a log cabin made of earth and wood, where lived a country boy named Johnny B. Good, who never ever learned to read or write so well, but he could play a guitar just like a ringing a bell. Go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, go. Johnny be good. He used to carry his guitar in a gunny sack, go sit beneath the tree by the railroad track. Oh, the engineer would see him sitting in the shade, strumming with the rhythm that the drive was made. The people passing by, they would stop and say, oh my, but that little country boy could play. Go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, go.
And so I end my presentation tonight with that to anchor the 60th anniversary of what is Honky Tonk, a seminal record at the dawn of the rock and roll era, but also a seminal message about the challenge of rock and roll and of American music, just contextualized. This is very critical that we contextualize the understanding of what was going on. As we were looking at the statistics all evening, earlier in the evening, for September 26, 1956, for October 1st, for December 1st, 1956. We're looking at September 26, 1956. That's this week, 60 years ago. That's what was going on 60 years ago. Emmett Till is killed in the summer of 1955. Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on December 1st, 1955. Honky Tonk is recorded in June of 56. There's a lot going on. Joseph McCarthy still has his House of American activities. It's still
possible to be indicted as a communist, as un-American. And as we saw in some of the images, the fact is that rock and roll promotes race mixing. And race mixing, according to the larger conservative Southern and American white mindset, political mindset, is an NAACP plot to monopolize America. Unbelievable that we're thinking, thank God 16 years has passed, but yet, of course, how is this connected today, to the conversation today? How have we heard some of this kind of stuff recently in our political campaign? Isn't that interesting? So one of my hallmarks of what I do in my lectures is creating kind of what I call these provocative multimedia presentations that allow for dialogue and help people to think and to contextualize history, music, politics, as well as now, and see how things have changed and think how things are still the same. So, but Bill Doggett, we honor him on his 100th anniversary, which is this year. It's born February 16th, 1916. The centennial technically will go through February of next year, and perhaps longer, because of the fact that, as I mentioned, the big show of 1957, which had all of those major headliners, there are a couple of ideas floating around to recreate that with old and new, which would be, of course, 2017. So we still have time. So anyway, I'm open to questions. I hope I've showcased quite a range of Bill Doggett beyond honky tonk, which I think I have. And I'm sorry that some of the clips, or actually some of the MP3s didn't play, but I do have my only qualification there is that I have a brand new computer, and I discovered through Office Depot that not all the newest PowerPoints aren't compatible with older PowerPoints, and I don't know why they did that, but it's the way it is. Anyway, yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
First of all, I want to thank you for your presentation. I have two questions, if I may. First of all, did Bill Doggett's, did he make it to the African American Museum?
Oh, he died.
No, I mean his story.
Not yet. I didn't. I understand Chuck Berry's Cadillac. I didn't see that section. I had the unusual fortune this week of having time passes. One on Sunday from a friend from New York who got a bunch of them early, and then someone who saw me on Sunday who said, "Doggett, you're not related to Al Doggett in Seattle. I'm from Seattle." Yeah, Al Doggett's my cousin. And she had all these passes for Monday and Tuesday. She gave me a Tuesday pass. So, no, I don't think so, but I think that's going to be changed. I think there's a lot of things. I think they did a fabulous job. If you have not yet had an opportunity to visit, this is an experience of a lifetime. There's nothing else like this in the world. I am a museum person. And as an African-American historian and archivist, I have to give it to all the forces involved, as well as the architects, oh my God, inside. They have done something that is a lifetime experience. They have also, I want to say something, you're very, 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 very lucky. I'm telling you, if this same museum were in Los Angeles or in the Bay Area or in Seattle, this is a $20 ticket, folks. There is absolutely no question in the world this is an admission museum. All the art museums that charge $15, $20 per person for adults, and then children are free. Like the famous, there's a brand new reconfigured San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. Mega new architecture, Frank Gehry, one of these, fancy building, really, must-see architectural wonder. I mean, I think it's $20 per person to get in. This museum is $40, but it's free. It's unbelievable that it's free. It's quite an experience. I hope that Bill Doggett and other things, a part of what I'm doing. I hope actually, obviously, and I'll do my own advertising here or shameless. Yeah, I should. Yes, I happen to know Lonnie Bunch from LA. I hope that Lonnie or someone close to Lonnie will see the value in having me come and present in a brand new, beautiful, almost recital hall, folks. theater called the Oprah Winfrey Theater. Beautiful hall. Can see. I mean, it's a movie theater. Literally, it's a mid-sized. It's actually a concert hall. I mean, if you're into concert halls, this is a perfect. And someone said to me that if any of you know, what is her name, Carol. I'm thinking my friend from New York. She saw this hall. She said it's a recital hall. This is you know, the African American Museum opportunity to have classical singers. By the way, Kelvin, that this hall would be great for the ensemble, and hopefully Lonnie and others close to that will see the programming possibilities of bringing in addition for something separate for the admission to see the museum to actually have a concert series. Anyway, I think that's yeah. So no, there's no Bill Doggett there to my knowledge, unfortunately.
Right. And then my second part is you being a family member, right? Can you honestly say that they compensated Bill financially?
You don't want to go there.
You know what I want to say?
No, you don't want to go there. Well, I will.
You know what I'm trying to
of course, I know what you're saying.
I mean, back in that time, they really didn't compensate the musicians financially well.
Right.
But he was on the top for, he was on the top of most of the top ones.
Bill Doggett is a major headliner. Bill Doggett, though, and I have to, I'm okay with this because I've talked to enough people, and I know, and I've also missed talking to people who passed on. Bill Doggett is a major headliner, but something happened that he did not have the PR machine that Fats Domino and Little Richard did. The major rock and roll movies, She's Gotta Have It, which showcased Fats Domino and Little Richard, and then Blackboard Jungle, which I think also had Bill Haley in the comments, and there was another one that had showcased Fats Domino. None of them, and I think one of them also showcased Bill Diddley, but where was Bill Doggett? I don't know, that's the unanswered question. But yes, the money piece is really huge. You hit on a very sore note. I will tell you this, I need to speak to this. Okay, so if any of you has a connection with a really good entertainment lawyer, the Doggett estate needs it. That is myself. I'm the Luke Skywalker in what is actually a very unfortunate situation. I'll leave it there. But I have to play Luke Skywalker in this particular situation. There's also Bill Doggett's relatives also are my older brother, John Doggett, and my older sister, Lorraine Doggett. But if anyone knows or has contacts with a really good entertainment lawyer, I would be very interested in knowing. Another question or comment? Yes. Yes, please.
Are you familiar with a woman by the name of June Cross?
I'm not familiar with her.
Or Stumpy?
Unfortunately, I'm not.
The comedy routine, two guys, Stumpy.
Okay, all right. Did they play with, were they part of one of
They were
the
part of
Apollo?
the scene that you just
Sure,
showed us.
okay.
They played the Apollo, everybody, Dean Martin.
Okay, cool.
And Jerry Lewis got their routine from these guys.
Wonderful. That's good to know. I didn't know that. I know that Jerry Lewis there are various versions, and I'm so sorry that the first version, which was a revised version of what you just saw, had some new segments in it. But the Treniers, when we talk about rock and roll and African Americans, the Treniers in 1954 really kick it off. I mean, actually, when Only Harris does, but technically in '47 with Good Rocking Tonight. But it's the Treniers in 1954. They set, as well as of course Big Mama Thornton with Hound Dog, which is also 1954. They set it in motion. They opened the door for Bill Doggett. So yes, go ahead.
My mother kind of introduced me to jazz. I grew up to the 50s. I was a teenager then, so that was my formative years. My mother had the first jazz album I heard was Wild Bill Davis. I think it was Autumn Leaves. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she brought that album, Daydream.
Yeah.
She brought that,
Yeah.
So I would introduce Bill Doggett through my mother, and the thing, the big hit with us, I really didn't, I think it was the flip side. I thought Blip Block was the flip side. But for us, the big hit was Soft.
Yeah, which I did not play, but yes, I have
Soft,
that.
Yeah,
I have it.
Soft. And the other one was Hold It. You know, with two huge hits when I was in high school, you know, for us. And we identified the first time, I don't know, sir, but the dance that we did with honky tonk was the slop, some call it slop. And an interesting story. We had a guy that was in Cleveland Small was, you know, when that honky tonk, we would do, all of us were doing slop when honky tonk came out. And James Brown, you know, came to one of those, you know, gut, what do you call it? One of those night spots. And I don't know how to, but I remember when I forget which song he had on, but Cleveland Small, one of them was doing the slop to what he was saying. And James Brown, after that, came out and to this guy and said, "Show me what you're doing." You know, I remember that. And the vein of that day when you do this drag and you're backing up or something, you know. So and that's a dance. I mean, I don't know where we thought it originated in Savannah, Georgia. Probably not, you know. But I just associated that with that song. And I would tell you something. That Bill Doggett, man, was when I got to Hampton, and we started in the civil rights movement. We started doing demonstrations and things. That was kind of like our backdrop beat was Hold It. And then, you know, we used to, you know, I mean, before we go out to Dawn, we would go down to Norfolk, Virginia, or something to do this. And you know, it was like we would get fired up.
Wow.
You know, with Hold It, and that was also, but that wasn't on our jukebox at Hampton, but it was in the jukebox, you know, as a man. But I remember Hold It. Blip Block was, we called it flip side.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And another one was Rainbow Ride.
Yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah, these are like good tape.
It's kind of like
right.
honky tonk.
Yeah. And he speaks to something which I'll just speak to
briefly. The challenge of Bill Doggett at King Records was he was constantly in the shadow of honky tonk, and Sid Nathan, who was an awesome entrepreneur and marketer, was trying to recreate honky tonk. In fact, there were 3 versions. There's the famous one, Honky Tonk Parts 1 and 2. There's the vocal version, which features Tommy Brown on vocals, and there's a Honky Tonk number 3, all within the first 3 years of honky tonk. But a lot of his songs, or some of his songs, especially after he left King Records, there was this attempt by his marketing people to do new versions of music that kind of had a honky-tonk feeling. And in the biography that I will probably write with or do the forward with other writers who are knowledgeable about the time, to do a Bill Doggett book that's mentioned in that video, the DVD that you saw at the beginning. Because Bill Doggett's challenge is that he was a jazz musician caught at age 40 in 1956 with honky tonk, which was kind of a surprise to him. It was a happy surprise, but a challenge that his roots were really jazz. He was a jazz musician.
Just this time, the guitars in the saxophone way. What happened when his combo? What career did they have?
Yeah, I can answer that to some extent. Fortunately helped by Jeff Shepard, the 99.5-year-old drummer who I've been in touch with. Chef, what happened is that Bill Doggett went on the road, and his stable band went with him for most of the time, and then when people had things come up, he had replacement people. Billy Butler, the iconic guitarist, actually had a separate career. Billy Butler, I think, might have for a minute been replaced by Bill Jennings. And Bill worked with lots of different people after this King period. The iconic period of Bill Doggett, Billy Butler, Shep Shepard, Clifford Scott, Floyd Johnson is 1953 to 1959, 60. So.
Was there ever any connection between Shirley Scott and Bill Doggett?
I'm sure there was. That's yet another story, another $64,000 question. Absolutely. I'm sure they knew each other.
I'm sure there was.
They had to. I mean, if James Brown has done interviews and films talking about how important Bill Doggett was, but how under-recognized Bill Doggett was, career-wise. And my aunt was always saying to me, she blamed, I don't know who she blamed, but she blamed American pop for allowing the British invasion. Because it's when the Beatles showed up, Bill Doggett's career died. Actually, that's not the case. It was that life happens, and Bill was doing one thing and a popular musician, but also coming up the ranks was the young Jimmy Smith, with doing a different type of style. And Bill responded to that in 64, 65 when Jimmy Smith was, of course, at his height. So Bill was a creative organist, and this can be said not just about Bill Doggett at this change, this change in the music scene that happens with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Monkees, all that 64, 65 stuff. This can also be said about other jazz organists who laid the framework. Bill Buckner in the 50s, Bill Davis. They played a lot of gigs in Atlantic City. My uncle was in Atlantic City. I mean, he's from Philadelphia, but there are so many people that have talked to me that are from Newark and Atlantic City about my uncle and how their memories of my uncle and all this stuff. But yeah, they continued to play in different things, in different ways, but it's kind of like I guess it's like anything in life, you have your time. I guess one would say, this is more a case that Bill Doggett's clear era, as he talked about, was 1953 to basically 1963, let's say. And right around that time, that's when you're seeing Jimmy Smith on Blue Note and all these classic, and then you have the emergence of Groove Holmes, Jack McDuff, you have all this stuff going on. You have a different movement. You've already got Ornette Coleman going on. You've got John Coltrane. You've got Horace Silver. I mean, you've got a different energy going on in music. The Bill Doggett era is clearly, and as you go to the website, BillDoggettCentennial.com, on the home page, on all the pages, there's immediate audio, and I have music players that showcase many of the key songs, but songs of the era. You're going to hear that Bill Doggett, as many people nostalgically remember, and as several women who are going to be here tonight, older black women who I saw at the museum waiting in line, that Bill Doggett, you're not related to, still, again, I mean, all my life has been like this. And they kept telling me about honky tonk. And so but these songs are from a period. And I think it's good to have that period. And that period is important to remember and to resurrect. And actually, if I can do anything with my marketing and sales skills and entrepreneurial skills, is to find sponsors to recreate this idea of the big show of 1957. Why? Because it's not just fun, but also it's a way to bring people together through music. Yes?
You say, now we get clarity, you say 1956 was the year of honky tonk?
Yes.
Now, was that?
It's also the year of Elvis. It's also the
Year of Elvis. I don't know where the Elvis people are. They should be all over the map.
Well, in the spirit of getting clear, okay, was that a marketing term for that rhythm? Because that rhythm, as far as I know, came out a long time before 1956.
Of course.
That feel was around.
The honky tonk, yeah, it's a blues feel. The honky is out of New York. It's out of Texas. It's been around for a long time.
I don't know that it's out of Texas either, necessarily.
It's honky tonk piano, honky tonk rhythm is often associated with Texas. The shuffle. It's a shuffle blues. Thanks, guys. See you. We'll talk later.
Turn of the century.
But you know what, I do want to say, I I respect you, and I appreciate that you played the part with James Brown. He re-recorded Honky Tonk.
Yes, yes.
And I didn't realize that him and Bill were on the same label back then. And I was a kid.
Friends, close friends. But I don't, Bill had his, and I don't know how much time I have, but I'm happy to take as many questions as I have time. Bill had, I don't know what to say. He had handlers that were trying to recreate him, and I don't know, this is again, all those $64,000 questions. He never talked about what happened. Why did he leave King Records? What happened between Bill Doggett and Sid Nathan? I have no idea. Someone else does. I'm sure there are people still living that know the backstory of why did he leave his major label.
He was with Ella and all.
Yeah, he's with Ella. Why? What's that all about? Why is? Now I understand. Well, that's the estate issue too. I mean, if you're talking, you heard the music, right? Okay, this.
It might be the contract thing.
Bill Doggett was, if you look at Bill Doggett, it's not just honky tonk. I mean, he has, and thank you. I'm very aware of the time, so. I didn't want to, I don't want to press for time. Are we okay? We have a couple more? Okay. Yeah. So I'm open. Yes, please.
Mr. Doggett, yes. I also want to mention that Bill Doggett was an influence on James Brown.
Yes.
James Brown recorded a vocal version.
Yes.
Of Honky Tonk. It's called Let's Make It. Let's Make It was an early 1950s recording.
Okay.
Also, James Brown also recorded Hold It. He used that in his stage show. That was one. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. I didn't know about that part. Yeah.
Also, my coworker, he's a good friend of Dr. Lonnie Bunch, the director of the National Museum of African History and Culture. I talked with him today.
Please. I welcome all the help because I think personally, I'm not going to be braggadocious the last person who used the term braggadocio was Donald Trump. I'm not that way, but I will say that I think I gave a pretty good presentation, and I had some interesting ways I contextualize music, and I think it's important that we bring people together, young and old people, to have an understanding of the challenges of music, of our music, and how, in many cases, as we saw here, Arthur Crudup, Mississippi Blue Country Blues singer, did That's All Right Mama. That's All Right Mama can be, as I said originally, can be seen and understood on one level, but it also can be seen on another level, coded message. But Elvis Presley appropriated it. It became a big hit. Elvis Presley's first big record on Sun in '54 is Arthur Crudup's 1947 blues record. Hound Dog, the huge Elvis Presley hit, how much money does Elvis Presley make on Hound Dog? That's Big Mama Thornton from 1954. It's a black record.
It's the era of Leave It to Beaver at that time.
Right, but it's also the era that historically...
The irony of Hound Dog is it was actually written by two Jewish guys from New York, Lieber and Stoller.
Right, that's true too. That is the irony.
So there's this other, flip on that. That makes it very interesting.
Yes, when you look at the politics of the whole thing, and then there are other clips, and this is actually, quite frankly, okay, I'm going to say it. So Judith, you heard this. This is actually a class.
This is what?
A class. This is a class looking at the issues of race and music, and this is part of a jazz semester class that I actually can teach. But just say.
So why aren't we getting gigs?
Excuse me?
Why?
Why? That's coming. I'll answer your question directly. Was another question? Back in the Yes, back to please. I can't hear you. What?
I just want to inject one thing.
Please.
It might not be important, but Elvis was a truck driver.
Yes, that was said. Yeah,
and
a 19-year-old truck driver.
Sometimes when you drive, vehicles and things like that, it influences the way you play your instrument.
That's awesome.
And I was just looking at how he.
That's interesting. I never even thought about that. I think he probably from my understanding of the situation, it was more the fact that he used to hang out and didn't acknowledge that he was hanging out listening to Arthur Crudup. I mean, why does he decide that his first commercial record is the record of this African-American man who has a style of playing and guitar playing and singing that actually is essentially appropriates? Because he was interested in the music, had this talent, and the coincidence that Sam Phillips, who was the first white man to record a black man commercially in the blues after Alan Lomax and the American field recordings, all of that. It's just what it. Tragedy is what it is.
I'm looking at it because driving is a physical thing, and music actually toys with physics.
Okay, that's an interesting point of view. I accept that.
I need to know how many records were sold of home